All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this last session of the day. We're going to talk about trust in AI, or more specifically, the trust gap with AI. I'm Emmanuelle Rivet. I lead PwC's technology practice globally, and in the US, I have the telecom and media sector. And I'm really thrilled to be joined by two outstanding shakers and movers in the AI space, who you'll see have a tremendous perspective on the topic. So, Christian and Hamza, I'd love for you to introduce yourself. Maybe starting with you, Christian.
Thank you. So my name is Christian Keller. I've been at Meta for the last 5 years, and previously I was an entrepreneur working in AI applications already. And at Meta, I've been working on two main products. The first one is called PyTorch, which is one that is used to build and develop AI models. And the latest product I'm working on is Llama, which is our large language model that's deployed today in surfaces like Meta AI and is open source also to the community.
Thank you. And I am Hamza, CTO and co-founder of Kevlar AI. We are building autonomous agents that investigate cybersecurity alerts. So today, there is a lot of tedious and repetitive work that is done by security analysts when a cybersecurity alert is triggered, in order to know if this alert is malicious or not, and in order to determine what should be done to mitigate the risk associated with this alert. And this investigation work couldn't be automated by classic algorithms, and this leads to what we call alert fatigue, and sometimes to burnout. So at Kevlar, we have the conviction that large language models revolution permits to automate a large part of this investigation work, and we are building our product around this vision. Thank you.
Thank you. So let me maybe set the stage for the conversation. It's obvious with everything around us here that AI, particularly Gen AI, has accelerated the pace of innovation and change. And that has actually created a little bit of tension on companies. And it was very much reflected in the last CEO surveys that we published in January, where the opportunities and the challenges were both portrayed, right? On one hand, you have 70% of the CEOs who believe that Gen AI is gonna, or AI more broadly, is gonna change the way they capture and deliver value. But on the other hand, you have about 2/3 of the CEOs who are actually, and that was their primary concern, was increased cybersecurity risks. So you definitely, both of you, are right on when it comes to that kind of challenge between opportunities and concerns with adoption of Gen AI, particularly at companies. And I think, interestingly, what we have seen is almost like companies ended up in two states. One is standing by the sidelines and waiting, and that we ended up calling that like the FOGO, like the first of getting on, the fear of getting on. And then on the other side, you have companies who are probably moving a little bit too fast. And they're certainly motivated by the fear of missing out. So there is a gap in between those two states, which we believe can be filled with trust, by trust, so that we can bridge that gap and allow a company to actually have a much more confident pace into AI adoption. So I'm going to get right into the subject, because building that trust gap, or filling the gap with trust, is not an easy feat. But there is a couple of things that we know, as we've studied trust quite a bit, allow you to get towards that state of trust and adoption of the technology. Number one is transparency. And I'd like to start with that, particularly with you, Christian, because I know Meta has been pretty clear about and supportive of open innovation. The company has actually made its current version of the Llama model open. And I know Jan yesterday, and some of you may have seen him or heard him, a little bit touch on that open innovation, open source model. And I would love for you to touch a little bit about what that approach really means.
Yes, I think transparency is definitely at the heart of building trust. at Meta, the way we develop AI has always been open source, like in the first place. This open innovation approach has been there from the moment we started developing AI, even from the tooling standpoint with PyTorch, and then through our work at FAIR, our research lab, and with our Llama models. Transparency can mean different things, though. So what we do is we provide our models with weights. We provide a white box, in a sense, environment for people to be able to use it, to test it. What this transparency allows and what the open sourcing of the model allows is for researchers and the community to take these models, test them, build confidence in them themselves, and also give feedback around where there are issues on it. And so there's actually a transparency index that's been started by Stanford University, and we're leading along the LLMs in there, but they look at a lot of different aspects about it and like what is shared with the community so that people can understand what the model does and use it. So I think open innovation in general is really critical, both from a trust building standpoint, but also from an accelerating innovation standpoint and building trust with the end users.
Appreciate that, thanks. Hamza, I'm going to come to you because you actually build your cyber product on Llama, and I was just wondering how critical was it for you to use an open source model?
There are lots of benefits in using open source models, especially when you are working on critical and sensitive use cases. The most obvious one is related to deployment. Since you can deploy your model in a controlled environment, you can better guarantee the data privacy in a very transparent way. The second benefit is the community. Since these models are open, they are deeply audited by the big open source community, and there are tools that are built around these models in order to mitigate the risks that have been discovered while auditing them. And the third and less obvious benefit is that having access to the code of the model itself, and not only communicating with the model through a very basic and simple API, permits to build control mechanisms that are at a lower level of the model. So instead of just post-processing the output or sending a prompt and hoping for the output to be compliant with what we said in the prompt, we can, for example, force the sampling strategy in the output of the model at a very low level, and this permits to build a deeper, more elegant, and more robust control mechanisms around these open source model. And that's it.
That's great. Thank you for that. Because I know a lot of companies and individuals are still confused about open and closed model. Let me switch to another critical building block of trust, which is performance and reliability, right? Meaning the expectation that the model is going to operate as intended and whatever it's supposed to solve is going to consistently be delivered. So again, starting with you, Christian, because as a builder of the technology, what are you doing to challenge that reliability and performance?
So I think about two main areas around this. One is around evaluations, and the second one is around looking at it at a system level. So for the evaluations, I think each user that wants to take a model that we have, or when we build like products, like needs to build very strong evaluations that keep getting challenged to make sure that the model and the system there delivers what they want for their end user. A lot of models that you're looking at today, for example, like in LLMs, use like academic benchmarks, but these are maybe good at checking if a model knows like European history, but they won't know well if it's going to create a good chatbot for your company to deploy. So having like a constant kind of evaluation and a solid one, I think, is going to be important. The other piece about evaluation is that usage evolves. Like we're at a really fast growing in a fast-growing industry. So the use cases that are going to be the hero use cases of any company, I don't think have been entirely defined yet with what these LLMs are. And so constantly updating your evaluation is really important also, I think, in order for you to keep that, that edge and knowing that the model delivers what you need. On the system side, there's how you deploy the model. Oftentimes we don't just look at how the model itself behaves, but we look at how it behaves in the context of a given product. An example of that is how we use LlamaGuard. So LlamaGuard is another product we've open sourced. And at the end of the day, it's a classifier that takes, for example, input prompts that you have from users, checks them to make sure that they're valid, they're following guidelines and integrity. Then these, once they pass that test, are sent to the LLM. The answer is then spun again into LlamaGuard and checks again whether the output follows our integrity guidelines and safety guidelines, and then it's sent back. So the LLM alone won't be able to provide you everything you need when it comes to the type of answers that it's going to give to the user, the safety that you'd like. And so thinking about it one step, I think, above the model and at the system level also makes a big difference. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense, because there's the core underlying model, and then there's that context, which I'm assuming for you is critical, right? Because obviously you build a product, and then that product gets integrated in an entire set of systems at a company. So how do you think about that performance and reliability in that broader context?
Exactly. That's what we should understand, is that the models themselves are not products. They are not systems. They are just enablers that we can use within systems or products in order to build some features. And when scoping and building these features, we should acknowledge how these models work, and what are their limitations. These models are statistical, and we can, for example, build systems around these models in order to control their output by validating it, assessing its quality, post-inference. We can also post-process this output and change it in order to make it more compliant. And sometimes it's impossible to do it with the deterministic systems, and we are forced to make a human facing this output without enough validation. And in this case, we should build mechanisms that make the human or the user who uses these systems to make them aware and make them acknowledge the statistical nature of these models, and make them aware that what they are reading is not factual, whatever the definition we give to this word.
So I think you actually started, and I'll ask you this question before maybe we get back to the audience for questions, but you started talking about the human. And when we talked about AI, there's a lot of talk about the human in the loop. The regulators with the AI Act have talked about human oversight. So I'd love to get your perspective on how you think about that.
Yeah. So when we are working on critical use cases where actions that can have a big impact are being performed, we cannot just let statistical models perform these actions or decide about performing these actions. And to do so, we must have a human in the loop to validate these decisions or these actions. And to do so, there are many UX challenges that are right now being tackled by actors such as Kevlar that are using AI in critical use cases. This is this is counterintuitive in the modern product idea, which is that products should be seamless, because we are building friction within the products in order to make the human validate and audit what the model is saying. So for example, when we are using retrieval augmented generation to answer questions or to summarize some text, we should be sure that the human have at least the possibility to audit the data that is underlying what the model generated. And this is a hard problem to tackle today, but very exciting. That's what we call AI user experience.
Bad AI user experience, to force the user to look at what's happening. How about you, Christian?
Yeah, I think I like your framing here, which is the understanding the impact that the model decision is going to have is where I think you can differentiate between the times when a human should be in the loop and when it's not necessary. You know, if I don't know, as an example, if I recommend a post about strawberry tarts instead of chocolate cake to you, maybe not a big deal. But if the decision that's going to happen, impacts someone's life, there's a safety issue related to that. The human in the loop, I think, today makes a lot of sense. I think overall it goes back to the question of safety for models and how you treat them. And so what again is good about the open source community here and a lot of the initiatives that have been started in the UK or in Europe or in the US with Stanford University is that there's a lot of people thinking about what are the impact both to individuals and to society of what these models are going to do. So I think this is an ongoing discussion that needs to happen in the communities so that we can all align on how these models are used.
Thank you. As promised, I'm going to come to the audience to see if there are any questions. One question here in the back, yeah.
Thank you so much for the sharing. We just talked about, say accuracy and also reliability of the LLM. Then, do you expect that there will be a industry type of, say, framework or say a verification standard to be implemented, and so that there will be a unified set of rules, universally applies, and so that everyone can rely on that standard or performance standard in order to justify the reliability going forward? What is your view?
I'll try to think so. Short answer is I don't know. I think it's there's a lot of dynamics at play here that have to do with geopolitics, country decisions about industry. When it comes to just technology itself, I think industry standards do come up over time, especially in areas of development. You've seen that with the use of GPUs and the optimization of them for models. Whether they're going to show up for things above that around policy usage and these frameworks, I'm hoping there's some agreement around what the risks are. And so I'm hoping something comes up that allows everyone to use the same language in a sense to what safety is. But I don't know how it's going to play out.
And certainly there are a lot of different industry consortia and other forums that try to facilitate multi-party discussions. And the more we can lean in, I know we are part of a few, and you are as well. So the more we can lean in that discussion, the more hopefully we can come up with a more universal standard. Any other questions? Right in the front.
It's been a great conversation on trust and transparency. So with all the buzz on AI and Gen AI, what have you found to be the biggest myth out there that needs to be busted?
Maybe the fact that these models are statistical and that they are just sampling the most probable sentence, and there is no deterministic database retrieval behind these models. So we should understand that they can hallucinate, and what they are saying is not easily traceable and controllable. That's it.
I think for me, it's that this is new. is not, that's a myth to me. It's not new. It's been there for a long time. Like at Meta, we've been using AI since 2006, and most of the times people who've used AI before has been just in a different form. It's been these recommender system mostly. So when you do a Google search, you know, you've been using AI. When you do, when you look at your feed on Facebook, you've been using AI. And so I think what's new today is, and where the trust needs to happen is building in these new types of AI, I think, that are being developed. And generative AI in particular is one where you know, it's a brand new tool that people have, and it behaves in ways that are unexpected to us initially. So I think the trust is there in AI, but it's just not in every part of it.
And that awareness is really important. The fact you know it, it's just structurally delivering the mechanism are completely different than what we've used so far with a machine, right?
And there's also a significant difference. That is that these models are using natural language to express themselves, and that they are expressing themselves in such a confident way. And that's, I think that's a valid point to be concerned about this particular myth.
Do we have any other questions?
So what are the enterprise implications when it comes to compute relative to cloud versus edge versus on-prem? Where do you guys see that evolving?
Well, that's a great question. I've been thinking about that a lot. I don't have I think a good answer. I'll tell you my reflection on this, which is that there are like two considerations to be had. Is like, one is like, what is the value that you want to derive? And usually the closer the model or the use case is to the user, the lower the latency. So there's this dimension around like low latency that comes into play. The second one is around the size of the model and how complex of an answer it can, you know, provide you. And so I think what we'll end up seeing, my belief here, this is just a belief, is that that you'll end up having models running at every stage, you know, from Meta's, you know, Ray-Ban glasses to the phone to the server, and at each step they'll all deliver like a different experience, or they'll solve a different problem. So the model you'll have on your glasses likely won't be able to write your, you know, 18th century French literature essay. You can try, but the one that's on the server can then, you know, do much more complex tasks like planning solutions and the likes, like you were mentioning earlier. So
I think that it's all about. So today we are making trade-offs regarding output quality, regarding data privacy, regarding throughput, and I think that in the future the goal is to not have these trade-offs, and to just deploy a small or a very quantized model in a small machine and having good performances.
And I think that's consistent with what we were seeing with client, which is different models for different use and of different size, different model of different size for different users, right? And I think that's kind of what we're starting to see, is that diversity and tailorization of model for ultimately what matters. The technology is the technology, but what problem is it solving is what's going to drive those kind of trade-offs that you mentioned. Are there any more questions? All right, so I think, well, maybe I can just wrap us up a little bit. So we started with this FOMO and FOGO dynamic that we're seeing with our clients. And the bridge between those two paths is probably the one that we need to build with trust, and that will allow a company to really adopt or move their journey of adoption of AI in a much more confident, responsible fashion. So thanks a million for joining us and contributing your thoughts. Having worked on this for a while, we do really all appreciate it. And thank you all for joining as well.
thank you for having us.
Thank you.